everybody. I'm excited about another episode of Clarksville's Conversation. So I'm here with my friend Charlie, and he's gonna introduce our guest today.
Well, Katie, we've got a friend of mine, CW5 Doug Englen, and man, he's got quite a story. And before we get too deep into that, first, Doug, I want to say welcome, and it's great to see you.
Well, I appreciate it. This is
Pleasure to
an
meet
honor
you.
to be on your show.
And what I want to know first, and you're in the 160th, and we'll get to all that, but I want to know how you got to Clarksville, why you're here. Tell us about your family. Give us some background.
Yeah.
Okay, absolutely. So the Chief Warrant Officer 5 is the highest warrant officer rank in the Army, and there's only 580 in active duty Army.
Wow.
There's about 1,200 total out of the 1.1 million person Army. That's it. So it's actually harder to make CW5 than it is a general officer, just by the numbers. And so I retired February 29th of this year. So just over a month and a half ago, I retired. So
does it count? Does it count since you retired on leap day?
It does. So I got full credit for every day of the year.
Okay.
Which was my grandmother's birthday, by the way. It was very
wonderful.
And wasn't even planning on it. So 33 years in the Army, and I joined right after high school. So I didn't continue my upper level education until I was in the service. And my wife of 32 years this year, we were high school sweethearts. We went to the same high school in the mountains in the southwest portion of in Colorado, southwest portion of Denver. That's where we ended up. My family, my dad was Air Force, NASA. He was in the missile and space. The what is it, the lunar project, the Mars Viking lander project. He was the director of that and the Star Wars defense program. And so we moved all over the place, but we ended up, for my high school years, ended up in Southwest Denver. So that's why I ended up graduating there. So moved around and seen so many places, from Cocoa Beach, Florida, to missile launches. My dad would take us to the beach and see the the rocket launches at night. And it was just that technical, that very side of the house. My granddad was a World War II vet on a USS Smith destroyer that was Japanese zeroed, lost 68 of his shipmates.
Wow.
So that heritage of military and service was just in the background. My father, he did say, listen, your brother's the one that gets the good grades in school. You need to go off. And he graduated from University of Colorado, and he's now one of the senior vice presidents for Nissan, and very, very successful. He lives in Colorado. But so it's just my brother and I. Met my wife before I joined the military, and so we dated off and on, and then we're engaged after I joined the military, and then we were married a few years after I was in the military. So we've known each other ever since. So she's been with me the whole journey.
So did you retired here in Clarksville?
I did. I had a choice. I could have retired anywhere. Now, we moved here in 1998. So I enlisted as a private PV, nothing. No stripes on the. I was getting I think it was a $480 a month paycheck is what I was getting paid in the Army back in 1986, 1987. Really wasn't anything, but I did pay my $100 a month for that Montgomery GI Bill to make sure I had my education benefits.
There you go.
Which was smart.
And it pays off. So I was working on helicopters, fixing them, got my FAA mechanics license and A&P, did that, and then went through and got my college, and then went to flight school. But stationed in Germany, stationed at Fort Benning, Georgia, stationed at the Colorado National Guard in the mountains of Colorado. My wife has been with the whole time. Had our first child in Germany when we were young. We were 21 years old, and he's now 30. And had our daughter in Colorado. So our second, we have 4 children. Went back to Germany a second time, and now as a pilot, as an aviator. Had our third child, a daughter. So our oldest is a boy, and then 3 daughters. You can't see it. I keep it cut pretty short, but these gray hairs are for my daughters. They'll do that. And then we just had our 4th child in 2000, but we moved here because I assessed for the 160th in 1998. And we have been here and lived in this area on Fort Campbell in Clarksville for the last 22 years. This May will be 22 years. And so this is home to us. This is the longest we have ever lived in our child or adulthood anywhere. So this is home. But my last job in the Army was the Senior Warrant Officer Advisor for Talent Management, working directly for the Secretary of the Army. And so every warrant officer in the military or in the Army was under my purview for monetization and make sure that legislation and policy and all this stuff was set. So that was my last job, and I could have retired out of the Pentagon, even though we still lived here. And I asked the 160th, can I retire out of my home, which is the 160th, and we retired in the hangar. So it was absolutely wonderful. Kelly Pickler came and sang the national anthem.
Yeah. That's wonderful. Katie, let me tell you, I was talking to Doug the other day and just kind of talking about who we know and friends, and one of my good friends that I play golf with and have been on some golf trips was one of the guys that trained Doug as a pilot when he got to the 160th. And who knew?
Small world. It's a small world.
Idea.
Small world. And we're not going to, I know we're being recorded, but let's not tell him he taught me everything I know. Let's not.
Oh, yeah. I won't tell him.
Because he's going to think it.
Yeah. So you join the Army as a private. You just come in there. You work your way up to be a pilot. But then there's a process of getting into the 160th, right? So you don't just all of a sudden get in there. You have to train and qualify. What was that like?
Well, so that fork in the road in a career, I was actually accepted into the Coast Guard. So I was a chief warrant officer too. I'd been flying for about 5 years. And the Coast Guard was notorious for taking qualified aviators from the Army, giving them a 5-year contract and then releasing them, which would have put me at 17, 18 years in the Coast Guard, and I would not have been eligible to retire.
Yeah.
But I was going to do it anyways. I was going to be an ensign and be commissioned in the Coast Guard. Very exciting. If you don't know what the Coast Guard does, please Google them sometimes. They're responding to emergencies off the coast of our nation daily. It's amazing what heroic events they go through. Well, I had a commander who was my mentor and inspired me to go to the 160th. Well, you had to fill out a packet. You have to go through background checks. You have to go through a psychological test. It's a confirmation to make sure you have no criminal offenses, no marital issues, no financial issues. I mean, it's everything that you see on a confirmation board as a Senate hearing confirmation. It is that on steroids, because you have a physical fitness test, you have a swim test, agility, mental, you have to go through a flight assessment, you have to go through an actual formal interview aboard, and it is extremely stressful. You feel about that big, and when you're accepted, you feel like the world is yours. And it's a week-long process, and I won't go into too much detail, but it's a volunteer force within a volunteer army. So you can imagine that everybody in the unit wants to be at work, and everybody wants to be a team player and wants to be there for the right reasons. So that environment is really hard to step out of. That's why I stayed with them for 22 years before I retired.
That's it's pretty interesting, because Katie and I have been blessed with a lot of friends at Fort Campbell, but we've also been able to spend time out there and visit 160th compound sometimes, and get the outer vision of it. Nothing really in depth, but it's really cool to see what the training you guys go through.
Oh yeah.
And we thank you for doing that.
Well, I appreciate, thank you, and I will take 100% of that and shift it to the ones that are in the unit now, because they are deployed right now. They're unable to return home, rotate. So I mean, there's some things that the Department of Defense is keeping readiness at the highest standard and the highest priority, because this is the time we don't want to become vulnerable. So that's why DoD's readiness model has to be the utmost importance. So even though 160th is a unit under Special Operations Command out of Tampa, Florida, and then the Army Special Ops Command, which is out of Fort Bragg, even though we're funded, we're resourced, we're trained, equipped, personnel, everything under SOCOM, we reside on Fort Campbell. So all of our installation guidance and orders come from the 101st Division Commander, the post commander. So he's doing a phenomenal job. It's tough. Think of that 2-star has the authority of a mayor, but he also has the authority of the well-being from a judicial standpoint. It's everything. Those commanders have more authority than you could think of any municipal leader out there. So Colonel Whiskey, he's doing a great job.
And right now, yeah, he is doing a great job. And right now are tough times, kind of unprecedented times. There are times when our leadership is having to make decisions that historically other leadership haven't had to make. Because, I mean, when we're dealing with this pandemic, it's just a lot of uncertainty and a new paths for everybody right now. So,
you mind if I expand on that?
Sure.
So we call it baptism by fire.
Yeah. We
know that we train for combat, and my current job, and I'll get into that, but I'm a defense contractor, so now I'm an instructor pilot for the 160th. I'll go more into that here in a second. But you don't know how people are going to react. You've trained and you've prepared and you've done everything to assess how this individual is. We vote our officials into offices thinking that they have this capability. But when the rubber meets the road and a crisis like this happens, you really see the true colors of those true leaders that are out there. And I will tell you, when you see both mayors up there in unison, and not everybody can get along, but they know what's important. And I know they get along, but but you can see where they're working together as leaders. And that's what we have voted them into office. So, I mean, I'm impressed because this isn't any rule book at all.
It's true leadership with a servant heart. They're there to serve others, not to, be in the spotlight. So they're doing I think all of our leadership from Fort Campbell to city to county, I think that they're doing an amazing job during this crisis right now.
That's right. And the thing is, you have 100% of the population that they're responsible for, even though not 100% are going to follow the rules or take care of themselves.
That's exactly right.
That's hard. That's really hard.
Well, you mentioned something a minute ago about guys in 160th being on deployment, and over your career, you've had 33 years in the Army. How much time did you spend on deployment?
Just from September 11th, it was almost 7 years. So it was 34 deployments. Some deployments would be 3 months, some would be 4. One of them particularly was only 6 days, and that was May 1st, 2011. And we can expand on that one a little bit more.
Yeah, but, let's talk about that one.
Let's talk about May 1st, 2011.
Well, that was a turning point in U.S. history. And we killed the #1 terrorist for modern civilization in history. The last time that we were after a manhunt after somebody of that magnitude was Adolf Hitler to stop the World War II. So that was our team. That was us. That I was chosen and selected to be in charge of the flight operations. So months of planning and preparation and rehearsals to actually go through. And when we were called to do it from the president, briefed the president several times on this at the White House. And it was just, you still get goosebumps today when we got the word to do it. First, we got the word to move forward into country, to be prepared. And then we finally got the green light. And, sometimes you don't ever think you'd get that green light, but we did. We prepared and planned well enough.
So when you guys started preparing and planning for this deployment, did you know at the time that you were going after Osama Bin Laden? Or did you just think you were going after, you knew it was someone important?
I knew exactly. And we didn't bring the air crew and the SEALs, the ground force, in until about 2.5 weeks before before actual May 1st. Because many
that was
times,
like a holy cow moment. We're going after Osama bin Laden. That's a big deal.
Well, so I don't wear my feelings on my sleeves much. So when the gentleman, a very good friend who's retired now, told me and just really pumped up the story, you know, because I've gone after Bin Laden 3 times prior to that. And it's really starting to make us pretty mad because we can't find him, or we find him, but he escapes us narrowly every time.
Mhm.
So he pumps it up. And then finally he looks at me and he goes, all this. And he goes, you know who we're going after? And he goes, we're going after Bin Laden. And the look on my face was like, yeah, right.
Again,
I took the air out of his balloon quickly. I mean, he's like, no, seriously. And then um, it finally did set in, and the importance and the value and the amount of you know responsibility that was on our shoulders. Not so much that if he wasn't there, but if we were going to do it and screw up the mission, and it would be a national embarrassment because we were going into a sovereign nation.
I think that that date and killing Bin Laden will go down in history books. So, how does it feel to know that you got to be part of something that will always be a part of history? I mean, that's pretty, that has to feel good.
Well, I feel honored. So, you know, and it wasn't me that flew the helicopter in, jumped out with a weapon, ran inside, killed him, and then jumped back in my helicopter and flew home. You know, it absolutely is not. You know, I had a portion of the success. If it wasn't for those maintainers that makes the equipment that we had on the aircraft, the equipment is what saved our lives. Because we were attacked on the way back electronically, and we could have been shot down. If it wasn't for that maintainer to make sure that that piece of equipment was top notch to protect us, we may not have made it. If those SEALs would not have been as proficient coming around the corners and taking their shots, vulnerabilize themselves to make it where they would get shot. Now we have injured. Now we have families that we're going to have to tell that we lost one of their loved ones.
Mm-hmm.
So it's and the pilots and the door gunners and just I tell you the massive restraint. I do want to point this out. When we were on the ground and I was picking up the SEALs and they had handfuls of stuff out of the compound, and the air crew of the crashed helicopter were jumping on the back of my aircraft, our aircraft. There was no other American on the ground except for in our helicopter, which puts us very vulnerable.
Oh yeah.
Our door guns are used to scanning for enemy, and the police, and non or bystanders, non-combatants are walking forward. You can imagine the amount of restraint that they had because they have a minigun that shoots thousands of rounds of ammo a minute. It's just the idea that they had the maturity and they had, because you can imagine the incident that would have taken place if they would have not had that restraint. So it's, even though I was more the orchestrator of the operation from the air piece, but it was down to the individuals, and it falls back that 1/60th. We make sure that we have the right person for the job all the time, everywhere in the world. And that's part of the assessment process. It is the people. It's always about the people.
Now, I'm going to ask a question that's probably to you going to sound really stupid, but I really don't know the answer to this. So that they go in, they kill Osama bin Laden. Who is it that goes in and says, yes, that was Osama bin Laden? I mean, how does that verify that that was him that was actually killed?
Well, visually, that's a big one. And if you look at the height, in fact, there's a book called Sea Stories, and Admiral Bill McRaven talks about it. It's in chapter, I think 23. It's his last chapter. And just how the ground force commander, not Admiral McRaven retired, but the ground force commander who was in charge of the SEALs on the ground had one of his SEALs lay down next to Bin Laden.
Oh, wow.
At one point, because Bin Laden is 6'3", 6'4". He's very tall, which is unusual for Arabs. And so that was a key characteristic. Plus, you have DNA. Plus, you have family.
Okay.
And all.
Yeah, I didn't think about DNA. That makes sense.
Yeah, DNA is the catch-all, but
Mhm.
visually you could tell. Plus, everything else and everything that we recovered, you could tell it was him.
I was just curious because I'm sure there was a lot of energy around that night.
That's well, everybody collapsed at the very end, and so it was you know, with to bring in the emotion to that night or the night prior was prom, and my daughter, who's 26 now, she was what 16 at the time, and it was 16 years old. The dress doesn't fit. Dad's gone again.
Yeah.
So you can imagine the emotions that were flying that night. And not but 3 days prior to that, I kiss my wife on the cheek and say, I'll be back in a little bit. Stay home this weekend. Don't go anywhere, please. And I've never told her that before, but she knew that I have been gone and I have been in unusual places planning. So the amount of stress I put on my wife and my 16-year-old daughter was just immense. What they go through on this end, and then they see the news report.
Yeah.
And it was just such an emotional kickstart on purpose. And my wife was like, okay, we had all four kids, she got everybody together. Her son was in Murray State. I believe he was a freshman or sophomore at the time. Everybody screaming on the phone, was that dad? Was that dad? And so my wife, Tina, is just keeping things together. And 2 hours after we returned back and exhumed the body, I got to help exhume Bin Laden's body. And once we're finished with that, I got the clearance to, after the president's already made an announcement, to call my wife real quick. And all I said is I'm okay, because there were reports of a crashed helicopter.
Mm-hmm.
All I said was okay. She said, I love you. And that's all we had to say. She knew that things were fine, but it's almost like that movie scene that you see where we're in two different parts of the world, but things are going to be okay. Now, I don't know when I'll see you again, but it's going to be a couple days.
Because all they know is daddy, husband's going to work. They don't know what daddy's going to do till they see it on the news.
That's right. And even at that, we had to go back to work. So even though we came back and high-fived and did our after-action reviews, not but a month or two later, I was back in Afghanistan getting shot at, and there was it's in that article, right back into the fight again.
Yeah.
So it's good because there were some SEALs that couldn't come down off the stardom. I myself found myself that way, thinking that I can't ever top that. What can I do now to ever top that? And then literally 3 months later, I'm in Afghanistan and we're saving lives and we're doing missions and realizing, okay, the big picture is now your profession. That's what you do. That's what we do.
That's what it seems like. Every mission is just as important as the other, and they all are very tactical. So you have to stay focused every time. It can't be about the big prize all the time.
Charlie, you are right on, because you could lose life at any one of those, what you think are simple missions. The Bin Laden raid, from a threat on the objective, the threat wasn't necessarily there because we had the element of time and surprise. In Afghanistan, from minute one hitting an objective, whether you're a ground force or your helicopter crew going in, that second that your noise is heard on an objective is dangerous. Not like the Bin Laden raid. The Bin Laden raid was everything inside the building for the SEALs, and then en route going in and coming out from the Bin Laden raid. So much different dynamics from a threat perspective.
Well, you've had a great career. I mean, that's an awesome story. But you've also been recognized with some awards. Little thing called the Silver Star. Katie, you may have heard of that. And also, I believe it's supposed to be in April, which this whole April's been kind of crazy. But the Army Aviation Hall of Fame. So tell us a little.
Oh, that's awesome, Doug.
It is, and we made a video to cover my career, which then led to friends of mine and coworkers and colleagues to submit my name. What it is, it's the yes, and I'm very humbled to say that, because now I'm amongst the Chuck Yeagers of Army Aviation. It's just hard to believe that I'm part of that. But at Fort Rucker, Alabama, that is the home of Army Aviation. That's where flight school is at, and that's where the museum is at. And in the hallway, they have the inductees of the Aviation Hall of Fame, all the way back to Medal of Honor, like Sandoval. I mean, there are Medal of Honor recipients that are on the walls, and I have the honor for my career to be recognized to be on the same wall as them. And that was supposed to be in April. They're either going to delay it or just roll it till next year.
Yeah.
But you will get an invite. And
I want an invite too, even though we're new friends.
it's a black and tie event, and so it's informal, and it's a great spread, and then it's a formal presentation of the awardees. It's a great event. It's in Nashville, right there at the Opryland Hotel.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations. That's quite an honor. And I feel honored just to like be able to hear all this story and get to know you.
Well, there's I've been asked to write a book and contemplating it, but it doesn't need to be about me, but I would love to use my experiences to motivate those to get into the same profession as more of a recruiting tool. Absolutely.
Well,
the motivation there is you really don't know the thousands, the millions of lives that you've saved by those actions. I mean, you changed the course of history.
It did. And to what extent, we'll never know. But we just have to have faith in knowing that, we were soldiers for a cause.
Mm-hmm.
And our way of life and our ideologies were under attack, and it'd still be under attack if he was still walking the face of the earth. Mm-hmm. So it absolutely is. It's very rewarding.
I'm going to try to quote Mayor Durrett. This is a dangerous territory.
Can you quote him like Mayor Durrett would say it?
No, I'm not gonna embarrass myself. But, we're talking about Doug and his career, but Mayor Durrett is one of the first to stand up anywhere at Fort Campbell or in public and say we live amongst heroes.
Right.
And it's not necessarily, not just the ones that win the big awards, but there are thousands in our community that don't get the recognition and we don't get to talk to, that are out there doing this every day. Mm-hmm. So that's why when I say I thank you, I thank everybody that's donned the uniform, whether, regardless of what service it's in, because I'm not doing it, but I get to enjoy the freedoms that you guys give us.
Well said, Charlie.
Well, if I could add to that too, I was in a situation where I work with, or used to work with SWAT quite a bit. And we'd be in uniform. I actually flew in the back of my son's helicopter when he was on the doing stuff, because he flies helicopters in the Kentucky National Guard. And I got to be his passenger while he was flying, and I was working with state troopers. And we went to a restaurant. We're in uniform, and the state troopers are all in uniform. And people come up to us in uniform in the service to thank us for our service. It was so embarrassing because daily, to me, I think what we're thanking service members is for their courage and their commitment to this country, and that they will lay their life down to preserve our liberty. Mm-hmm. But so do the police, the fire.
Yeah. Exactly.
And sometimes more so. So I always make a point that those that are in uniform, even if I get pulled over for doing 1 mile an hour speed limit, I'll just leave it at that. I actually thank them for what they're doing, even though I wasn't wrong. And I try to be the model citizen, so I put them at ease. I couldn't imagine. I mean, that's a tough job. And then today, if they pull somebody over who may or may not have the virus, so I just want to extend that. I firsthand felt I was humbled that we were honored, and sitting right next to us were police officers that didn't get the same recognition.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Thank you both, Rod. Well, Doug, I appreciate you taking time to meet with Charlie and I love your story. I'm honored to hear it. And when he sent me the email today saying we were going to meet with you, I couldn't wait to hear it firsthand. So thank you for sharing it.
Yeah. And I have one last question. We don't get real political on this show at all, but I know Doug's got some aspirations, and tell us kind of what we know you're a flight instructor now, retired, and now you're a flight instructor, but what else are you getting into?
Well, as a flight instructor, so I'm under a defense contract for foreign military sales. So the British military, the British Air Force, Royal Air Force, are purchasing our style of aircraft, our helicopters. And so I have the honor to train them, the training plans, the culture to bring us together. So we have similar capability. So when you see British officers or you start hearing them around town, that's kind of the reason why you're going to see us either teaching them here or in the UK. So it's, I hate to say it, but is it a job? I guess it is. It's because it's more fun than it is a job. But so that's what I'm doing now. Basically 2 days after I retired. But what inspired me to retire, I would still be in the service today, working in the Pentagon. But we do have a congressman in our area that we work together and have known each other for a few decades now, and inspired me to carry what I've learned just from organization and leadership, communication, and truly serving people, that he asked if would I be interested in local politics. So the answer is yes. So I am going to run. I am running, and I'm on the ballot for state senate for our district. And so I'm excited to kind of bring forward what I have learned from the military, but not just as being a private, which probably learned more as a private because I had to learn how to follow directions. And then you realize that to lead, you have to have been led, and to understand now the intricacies of our political environment and our government. And I believe in our government. I really do, and I believe in how we're structured. We just need to remember.
It's just a different way to serve, which is something you've always done.
That's right.
It is. It's selfless. So. And it's my family too. They're jumping on board as well.
Well, thank you for joining us today, and I wish you lots of luck.
Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate the time, and when short stories or if a book is coming out or another, I'll definitely let you know and share it with you.
Please do.
Okay, thank you.
We have